All right, hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Saturday, August 28th, 2021. This is your evening tropical update, where tonight we continue to track a rapidly intensifying Hurricane Ida in the central Gulf of Mexico with her sights set on the northern Gulf Coast. Landfall expected in central to southeast Louisiana sometime tomorrow afternoon. And as expected, the hurricane is on schedule and is quickly intensifying this afternoon. Last time we had talked earlier today, we said, the intensification hadn't quite happened yet. We were still waiting on it. Well, this evening it appears that that is fully underway, and we have a Category 2 hurricane that is quickly approaching Category 3 and still expected to be a Category 4 before landfall, which would does present an extreme sort of threat to the northern Gulf Coast, especially southeast Louisiana in that region. So let's go ahead and take a look at the latest from National Hurricane Center as of 5 p.m. this afternoon. Maximum sustained winds 105 miles an hour. Recon currently flying, not seeing tremendously higher winds, but we are seeing a significant pressure fall. So the winds typically have to catch up to that pressure fall. I would imagine that the 8 p.m. advisory won't have a ton of updates, but 11 p.m. we could probably be dealing with a Category 3 hurricane by then. The maximum sustained winds are, again, 105, movements to the northwest at 16 miles an hour. So the storm, thankfully, is still moving along at a decent clip. So hopefully that forward momentum will carry this through landfall and get it in and out of the landfall location as quick as we can. But a little bit of a slowdown will happen through Sunday and Monday as this kind of has to make a turn to get up and out of here. The evening satellite presentation of Ida is still pretty impressive. The system is undergoing that rapid intensification as we saw or we talked about earlier. The latest convective burst is in that southwest quadrant, and what we're kind of watching for is the expansion of the central dense overcast, the healthy meat of the storm, if you will. And every hour we see these convective bursts happen, and they kind of rotate around, and they just sort of expand the whole hurricane a little bit further out. And this is something you're going to see over and over tonight as Ida continues to wrap that deep convection around the eye and expand her winds, expand her influence. And again, what we see in a pretty quickly intensifying hurricane. The evening satellite pass for the microwave band did catch a pretty good catch on Ida. And what we kind of see is an interesting feature. So we have the most of the convection, a bit of an asymmetric eye, the bulk of the convection on that north sort of east side of the storm. Not as impressive on that southwest side of the eye, but that convection again will continue to wrap around the eye, and unless something disrupts it, it kind of builds on itself every time we continue to see that increase. There's a second band, though, trying to wrap in, and sometimes this could be an indication of an eye wall replacement cycle, which is where the hurricane drops that more intense inner eye and expands a bit further. It's probably a little bit early for that, so what's probably going to happen is this more intense convective band will wrap into the eye, and you'll kind of see one uniform eye kind of take effect in the storm. But we could also see a bit more of an expansion, and the game we're playing tonight with intensity of Ida, and this is difficult to kind of convey because a lot of times with hurricanes, we only really talk about them in the terms of their max winds. This kind of goes back to the Katrina debate. Remember 2005, Hurricane Katrina, one of the most devastating hurricanes in United States history, was only, quote unquote, a Category 3 because Katrina's maximum sustained winds were only about 120, 125 miles an hour. However, the hurricane was gigantic and had a very, very deep central pressure in the 920 millibar range, which 920 millibars is about what most Category 5 hurricanes in the U.S. have landfalled at, 920 or below. So when the latest in how we convey hurricanes nowadays is by maximum winds, but that pressure in the wind field is also very important. It's not just the maximum sustained wind. Sure, you may have a hyper intense wind 5 to 10 miles from the eye, i.e. Hurricane Andrew in 1992, but then the rest of the hurricane isn't that bad. Or you could have a Category 3 like Katrina, but have a massive wind field associated with it, which can create its own problems. So the game tonight we're playing with Ida is, yes, she's going to quickly intensify. We understand that. But do we see a hurricane that tries to build a really hyper intense inner core with a more lacking outer core, or do we see a storm that intensifies in a more widespread range, so the whole hurricane is a more intense storm, but say the maximum sustained winds maybe aren't quite as high? This is the problem we have, and the issue with this is the more hyper intense the hurricane, the more destructive it is near where the eye comes ashore. The larger the hurricane, the less destructive it is at the immediate landfall point, but you get more storm surge and more destructive impacts well away from the eye. So it's not good news in either sense, but how exactly this hurricane shapes up and how it impacts the coast still to some degree remains to be seen. But we can see on this microwave imagery that we kind of have a little bit of both things going on. And whether this outer band wraps in and it becomes part of the larger eye feature, or this competes to become the new eye of the storm and this inner core eventually drops out, remains to be seen. But the bottom line is neither of these are good news. And the reality is that Ida is still tracking over some of the warmest, deepest water in the Gulf of Mexico and will continue to explosively intensify throughout the evening because there's nothing slowing it down, essentially. Recon data also shows this potential issue with the wind max popping up. You kind of see a dual wind max. You see this little plot right here instead of this line being a more gradual increase in wind speed to the inner eye wall and then dropping off at the eye and then coming back up in the other eye wall and then going back down. You kind of have these little peaks where you have these little intensity maximums, which again are indicating there's a second band trying to come in. So same thing we just showed you on microwave. We'll see how that plays out. But that's kind of the game we're playing. Whether that band wraps in or not, you have an intensifying hurricane. And like we've said before, the difference in Category 3, Category 4, Category 5, it's touching a 400, 450, or 500 degree stove. It's all terrible and it's going to burn you either way. So best not to get too caught up in the details. Evening, the central pressure has fallen to at least 970 millibars. Hurricane hunters are flying this pretty consistently tonight. And when you see these numbers drop from 974 to 970, that's basically, they come in, they make a pass, they come around, they make another pass, and if the pressure is dropping that quickly, that again signals that intensifying hurricane. Tomer Berg on Twitter shows this pretty well. We can see the plot of the storm from yesterday. The storm explosively or quickly intensified, and then it got near Cuba. It leveled off, and then it kind of came off Cuba. And like I said, up until this morning, up until about 8, 9 o'clock this morning, or really closer to about probably not noon on this graph, we didn't see a massive pressure drop. But then this afternoon, this evening, we've seen a much sharper pressure drop in the last few hours than we've seen at any point so far, besides that little bit of a point before Ida got to western Cuba. So that intensification period we saw near Cuba is once again underway in terms of the slope of this graph, meaning that Ida is back underway from that gradual intensification we saw from last night until about midday today to tonight. So definitely an issue there. Water vapor satellite imagery again shows there's really nothing bothering the storm. A beautiful outflow canopy, classic major hurricane outflow, sort of aloft. This little upper low has kind of been reduced to like this little trough, and it is now again venting the storm away, meaning it's pulling air aloft from the storm and giving this thing as much of an exhaust outlet as it possibly wants, and that intensification underway. Ida tonight, just now approaching this patch of insanely deep, warm water in the central Gulf of Mexico, and this will continue to fuel that intensification through tonight and into early tomorrow morning. The only saving grace we have is near the coast. This water does get very shallow, and the potential to pull that warm water up and then replace it with cold water is higher. So that's kind of what we hope for, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the Gulf Coast hurricanes, they just intensify, clear through landfall. It could be a silver lining, may not be as well. Intensity models have come back up towards Category 4 intensity, and the hurricane center remains about that 130 mile an hour hurricane intensity at landfall. And again, this is still be expected to be a Category 4 hurricane at landfall. Again, like I said this morning, I think any chances of Category 5 probably off the table because of the amount of time it took to restart its strengthening phase, is what we're going to hope. But again, the difference in top end 3 or 4 or 5 is kind of all the same terribleness. Evening H-Worth model does see that the central pressure of 970 millibars at 21Z, which is 20 about 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon, is about on schedule. The HWRF probably a little bit ahead of schedule with the intensity, but generally you can see that the HWRF does expect that the central pressure to continue to just bomb out throughout the evening and brings us to sub 945 before landfall in terms of the central pressure. May not get that low, but this kind of pressure is indicative of a strong Category 4 hurricane, and there's not a lot of reason why this couldn't happen. Let's go ahead and quickly recap your impacts. No major changes in the overall impacts of Ida since she is on that expected forecast trend. We still expect 10 to 15 feet of storm surge near Morgan Stage to the mouth of the Mississippi River. That is water, again, if you were at the beach, 10 to 15 feet tall. as in that's the water rise. So if you're a 6 foot man on the beach, that's water 4 to like 9 feet above your head. It's pretty incredible. That kind of water rise is coming for the coast. And also note that it's not just where the eye comes ashore. Again, the eye is going to come in somewhere right about here, but that right front quadrant where all that wind is rotating onshore is going to push a ton of water into these areas to the east of landfall point, east of New Orleans, 7 to 11 feet, even 4 to 7 feet towards the Mississippi coastline. Lake Pontchartrain can see water rises 5 to 8 feet, pushing up against those levees. Even Lake Maruepas 4 to 6, and 6 to 9 feet out to the west towards Vermilion Bay. So a lot of water is coming with Ida, and again that micromanage of okay, is the water, is the wind field going to expand where we have more storm surge, or is it going to keep more contracted where we have more wind damage? That's the game we're playing with this sort of water rise coming for the coast either way. And note that the bayous and swampy terrain of southeast New Louisiana means that this water will push well inland. This is not going to be just, within 2 or 3 miles of the coast, this water is going to push well inland. And you can see anywhere in red now it has the potential to see storm surge greater than 9 feet, and this surrounds a lot of New Orleans. So we really hope whatever that levee system has had done to it since Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and the pump system, everything else, whatever happened, we really hope they did a good job, because this is going to be a test that they have not had since 2005. So we really hope whatever happened is going to hold. As far as the compounding flood problem, we have the storm surge, but we also have the rainfall totals. WPC's evening forecast still shows more than a foot of rain coming for southeast Louisiana, up to 15 inches on the official forecast. And like I've said before, anytime you see these sort of rainfall forecasts for tropical cyclones, you have to always add up to double what you see on the map. So you see 14 inches, you could get almost 30. I mean, 28 to 30 inches is possible. Probably some folks are going to get more than 2 feet of rain from Ida. Again, as it makes the turn, you stay in the worst part of the storm longer than if the storm just tracked straight away and moved away. You kind of have this longer effect because you're kind of at the apex of that turn of the storm. So you stay in the worst part of the storm longer, and you get pelted by onshore winds and rain bands even longer. But also note that the flooding threat does not just stop at the coast; it also carries well inland, where totals, 4 to 8 inches are possible from southern Mississippi all the way up to Kentucky in the southern Ohio Valley, where heavy, heavy rainfall is expected with Ida's remnants. And please respect tropical cyclones as they move inland. They can dump very heavy rain on you well away from the coast. Winds to come again, dependent on final intensity. I like the European model for winds near the coast, with those wind gusts exceeding 120, 130 miles an hour, even 145 just offshore. Very likely, if this thing does manage to get to Category 4 status, again, that's maximum sustained winds at least 130 miles an hour, and you can have wind gusts beyond that. But I think the Euro may overdo it a little bit inland, so I want to show you the GFS forecast, which probably has a little bit more realistic drop off of the winds. But I still want to note that the potential for high tropical storm force winds are carrying into parts of Mississippi, Arkansas, and northern Louisiana. So don't think that, oh, well, I'm not at the coast, I'm not going to get strong winds. You can definitely get strong winds well inland. This is enough to knock out power lines, take down tree limbs, etc., etc. So please keep an eye on that. And finally, the tornado threat is increasing. The Storm Prediction Center has went to a slight risk for tomorrow. Tornadoes up to a 5% hatching, and they note that the general chance for thunderstorm, or for tornadoes rather, has come up, as it looks like higher dew points in that 73 to 76 degree range are coming in. That adds more buoyancy to the atmosphere and does add more potential for tornadoes. Then there are several Gulf Coast hurricanes that have produced a lot of tornadoes. So beyond the wind and the rain and the surge threat, there is a enhanced threat of tornadoes tomorrow, and you will likely see tornado watches for southeast Louisiana and southern Mississippi, even possibly into parts of southwest Alabama, and those could extend northward tomorrow night and into Monday. But that's what I got for you guys this evening. We will be rolling updates throughout the night on the Facebook page, and tomorrow, as this thing makes landfall, please rush any final preparations and be ready, because this thing is going to be nasty when it comes in, and it is not something to mess with. So until then, guys, stay safe, stay ready, check on your friends in this area. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.